Colorado Territory, 1876. The mountain air bit with autumn's first chill as Preston Calloway squinted at the weathered homestead nestled against the foothills. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, promising warmth he had long denied himself. At 25, Preston had learned one truth about the frontier: attachments were dangerous luxuries. Men with families became vulnerable. Men with dreams became disappointed. Better to drift with the seasons, taking work where he could find it, leaving before anyone could matter too much. "This is the McAllister place?" he asked the ranch foreman who'd hired him. "It's the Randall place now. Widow Randall's been managing since her husband died last winter. Caught pneumonia and was gone before spring thaw." The older man chewed thoughtfully on a piece of grass. 5 young uns and a ranch too big for one woman. She needs the help, even if she won't admit it. Preston felt a familiar unease. Children complicated things, made leaving harder. "I signed on to break horses, not play nursemaid. Horses need breaking. Fence needs mending, and winter's coming." The foreman shrugged. "Do the work you were hired for. The rest ain't your concern." As they approached, the front door swung open. Preston's breath caught. Framed in the doorway stood a woman no more than 22. Her honey-blonde hair swept into a practical bun that couldn't quite contain the wayward curls framing her face. Her blue calico dress had seen better days, patched at the elbows and faded from washing, but it couldn't hide the graceful strength of her figure. What struck Preston most were her eyes, clear blue and sharp with intelligence, sizing him up with neither welcome nor rejection, merely assessment. "Mrs. Randall, this is Preston Calloway. Best horse breaker I could find." The foreman tipped his hat. "Zara Randall." She extended a work-roughened hand, her grip firm. "The horses are in the north pasture. Wilder than sin and twice as dangerous. Think you can manage them, Mr. Calloway?" "Yes, ma'am." Preston kept his voice neutral. "Managed worse." A small face appeared around her skirts, followed by another, and another, until 5 children of descending heights stood examining him with undisguised curiosity. "These are my children," Zara said, her chin lifting slightly. "Jacob is 10, Emma 8. The twins Samuel and Sarah are 6, and little Grace just turned 4. The oldest boy stepped forward, shoulders squared in a man's stance though he barely reached Preston's chest. "Are you staying in the bunkhouse with the other hands?" "Yes, he is," Zara answered before Preston could respond. "Mr. Calloway is here for the horses, not for social calls." Her dismissal was clear. Preston tipped his hat and followed the foreman toward the bunkhouse, feeling those blue eyes on his back the entire way. Good. The widow had boundaries. Made his job simpler. He'd break the horses, collect his pay, and move on before the first heavy snow. That's how he'd survived this long, never letting down roots in soil too harsh for anything tender to flourish. That night, stretched out on his bunk, Preston listened to the other ranch hands talk about the Randall place. "Widow's too proud to admit she's drowning," said the cook. "Ranch this size needs a man's hand. Needs more than a hand." Another man laughed, earning dark looks from the others. "Watch your mouth," the foreman growled. "That's a decent woman fighting for her children's future. Any man speaks of her with disrespect answers to me." Preston turned toward the wall. None of his concern. The West had taught him one lesson well. Sentiment was a luxury that got men killed. Better to stay unattached, unentangled. Come spring, he'd be nothing but a fading memory to this place. The next morning, Preston stood at the corral, watching the wild mustangs circle nervously. Beautiful animals, proud and untamed. He understood them better than people. They made no pretense, harbored no hidden motives. "Can you really break all of them before winter?" Preston turned to find Zara Randall standing at the fence, the rising sun catching gold in her hair. Without the children clustering around her, she seemed younger, more vulnerable somehow. "Yes, ma'am. Please don't call me ma'am. I'm hardly old enough to be your mother." A smile tugged at his lips despite himself. "Yes, Mrs. Randall. Most of the ranch hands are leaving after harvest." She spoke matter-of-factly. "They follow the seasonal work. I need those horses broken and trained to pull the plow come spring." "I understand." She studied him, her gaze unervingly direct. "Do you? This isn't just work, Mr. Calloway. This is survival. If I can't plant next season, I lose everything." Something in her voice, pride without self-pity, determination without desperation, struck him. Preston found himself saying, I'll stay until they're properly trained. You have my word. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by cautious gratitude. Thank you. That afternoon, as Preston worked with the first Mustang, he felt eyes on him. Looking up, he spotted Jacob Randall watching from the fence. The boy had his mother's direct gaze. You ever break a horse before? Preston called. No, sir. Pa was going to teach me this spring, but... The boy's voice trailed off. Preston hesitated, then beckoned him over. Come on, then. Might as well learn now. Over the next weeks, Preston fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings with the horses, afternoons teaching Jacob the basics of ranch work, evenings eating the meals Zara insisted on bringing to the bunkhouse personally. He told himself it was just practicality. The boy needed skills, the widow needed her horses trained, and he needed the work. Nothing more. But October brought an early blizzard, howling down from the mountains with barely a day's warning. Preston helped the other hands bring in the livestock, working through the night as the temperature plummeted. Near dawn, stumbling with exhaustion, he made one final check of the corral where the newly broken horses huddled against the storm. That's when he saw the light in the barn, a lantern swinging wildly. Through the curtain of snow, he made out a small figure struggling toward the chicken coop. Without thinking, Preston plunged into the storm. Jacob, he shouted, the wind whipping away his words. But it wasn't Jacob. As he reached the small figure, Zara Randall's face turned up to him, snow-crusted and determined. The chickens, she shouted over the wind. The coop roof is collapsing. Together they fought through the drifts, Preston half carrying her the last few yards. The chicken coop was indeed collapsing. The birds huddled in terrified confusion. Working side by side, they transferred the chickens to the barn, Zara's hands as sure and capable as any ranch hands despite the bitter cold. When the last chicken was secured, Preston turned to find Zara swaying with exhaustion. Without discussion, he swept her into his arms and headed for the main house, fighting the wind with each step. Inside, the children were awake, wide-eyed with fear. Mama, Emma cried, running forward. I'm all right, Zara assured them, her voice steady despite her shivering. Mr. Calloway helped me save the chickens. That night, Preston slept on the floor before the kitchen fireplace, unable to make it back to the bunkhouse through the raging storm. He woke to find little Grace sitting cross-legged beside him, studying his face with solemn brown eyes. Are you going to marry Mama? She asked with a child's directness. Preston sat up so quickly his head spun. What? No. The little girl's face fell. But we need a papa. And you're nice. You don't yell like Mr. Harkins when he came to collect the money. Before Preston could respond, Zara appeared in the doorway, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Grace, that's enough. Go help Emma with breakfast. As the child scampered off, Zara said quietly, I'm sorry. Children have no filter. No harm done. Preston stood awkwardly. The storm's letting up. I should check on the horses. Zara nodded, but as he reached for the door, she said, Mr. Calloway. Thank you. For last night. Most men wouldn't have risked themselves for chickens. Most men haven't seen what a loss like that means to a homestead. The words came unbidden. Memories of his own family's failed farm rising like ghosts. Every animal counts when you're trying to survive out here. Something shifted in her expression, recognition, perhaps. For a moment, they stood in perfect understanding, two people who knew the brutal arithmetic of frontier survival. Then Preston broke the spell, stepping out into the blinding white world. The storm changed things. Preston found himself invited to Sunday dinners, drawn into evening readings where each child practiced their letters. Zara watched him with the children, her reserve softening. One evening, helping her mend harnesses by lamplight after the children were asleep, Preston finally asked the question that had been troubling him. Why stay? This place is killing you. Zara's hand stilled. This land is their inheritance. Everything Thomas and I built together. I won't let them lose that too. At what cost? What would you have me do? Move to town? Become a laundress or a seamstress? Take charity. Her voice hardened. This land can feed us. Can give my children a future. Not if it breaks you first. Her eyes flashed. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Calloway. Preston, he corrected softly. After saving chickens together in a blizzard, I think you can use my given name. A smile touched her lips, transforming her face. Preston then. That night, riding back to the bunkhouse, Preston confronted an uncomfortable truth. He was staying because of her, because of them. The realization terrified him. Attachment was weakness. Caring made you vulnerable. The frontier killed sentiment as surely as winter killed the unprepared. The next day, Preston worked the horses with ruthless focus, pushing away thoughts of blue eyes and children's laughter. When Jacob appeared for his usual lesson, Preston sent him away with a gruffness that made the boy's face fall. Better the boy learned now. Disappointment was the West's most reliable crop. But that evening, an unexpected visitor arrived. A well-dressed man in an Eastern suit introduced himself as Thomas Randall's cousin, Elias Randall, recently arrived from Boston. "I've come to offer assistance," he announced over the dinner Zara had reluctantly invited him to share. "The family is concerned about Zara managing alone. I can arrange for the sale of this property at a fair price. The proceeds would allow you and the children to return east, where you would have proper society and education." "This is their home," Zara replied evenly. "Their father is buried on that ridge. Our future is here. My dear, be reasonable. A woman alone cannot manage a ranch of this size." "She's not alone," Preston found himself saying. "She has hands. Good ones." Elias assessed Preston with cold eyes. "Seasonal workers who will leave her stranded come winter. No, the sensible course is clear. I'll begin arrangements for the sale." After Elias departed for town, Zara stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. "He's right about one thing. Most of the hands will leave after harvest. I can't afford to keep them through winter." Preston leaned against the porch rail. "What will you do?" "What I've always done. Survive." She looked at him directly. "Will you be leaving too?" The question hung between them, weighted with more than employment. Preston knew the sensible answer. He'd planned to move on before snow closed the mountain passes. Winter work was scarce, and attachments were dangerous. Yet looking at her in the fading light, he couldn't form the words. "I gave my word about the horses," he said instead. November brought the harvest, and with it, the departure of most ranch hands. Preston watched them go with a strange hollowness. He should be among them, following the work, keeping movement between himself and the ghosts of his past. Instead, he found himself helping Jacob winterize the barn, teaching Emma to manage the gentler horses, showing the twins how to check trap lines. One evening, returning from town with supplies, Preston heard the unmistakable sound of a heated argument coming from the main house. Through the window, he saw Elias Randall gesturing forcefully while Zara stood rigid with anger. "The arrangement is finalized," Elias was saying. "The buyers will take possession after Christmas. Be reasonable, Zara. A young woman like you could remarry in Boston. Find a proper father for your children." "This land belongs to my children." Zara's voice cracked like a whip. "I never authorized you to sell it. As executor of Thomas's estate, I'm acting in the family's best interest. The deed will transfer after Christmas. Make your preparations." Elias gathered his hat. This frontier madness ends now. When Elias exited, he found Preston blocking his path. The banker's eyes narrowed. "Eavesdropping, cowboy." "Just arriving with supplies." Preston kept his voice neutral. "Is there a problem?" "Nothing that concerns hired help." Elias brushed past. "Mrs. Randall will be leaving after Christmas. I suggest you look for work elsewhere." Inside, Preston found Zara staring out the window, her face a mask of controlled fury. "He's selling the ranch out from under us," she said without turning. "Claims Thomas made him executor. He's had the papers all along, waiting for the right moment." Her hands clenched. "I have until Christmas. Then we lose everything." "Can you fight it legally? With what money? What lawyer?" She finally faced him, and the despair in her eyes cut him deeper than he thought possible. "I was a fool to think I could save this place." Without thinking, Preston crossed the room and took her hands. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Zara Randall. We'll find a way." Her eyes widened at the "we," and Preston realized his mistake. There was no "we." There couldn't be. He'd learned the hard way that the frontier destroyed families, that love was a luxury the West couldn't sustain. He'd buried his parents, his sister, watched disease and hunger and the brutal land take everything. He'd sworn never to care that deeply again. Yet here he stood, holding the hands of a woman who had somehow slipped past every defense. "I should check on the horses," he said abruptly, dropping her hands and retreating. That night, Preston lay awake in the empty bunkhouse, memories crowding like ghosts. His father's farm in Nebraska, the hopeful beginnings, the slow destruction as drought and grasshoppers and illness stripped away first their crops, then their livestock, then their lives. His mother wasting away from consumption, his father's suicide when the bank foreclosed, his sister's death from fever the following winter. Preston had survived by becoming a drifter, taking his skills where they were needed, never staying long enough to care. Until now. The next morning, Preston rode into town with a plan forming. The local banker confirmed his suspicions. Elias had arranged the sale to a cattle company looking to expand. The price was well below market value, with Elias taking a substantial commission for his management. Can he do this legally? Preston asked. The banker shrugged. If he's the executor, yes. Unless Mrs. Randall contests it in court, which takes money she doesn't have. Preston's next stop was the land office, where dusty records confirmed the Randall homestead boundaries, and something else that made his pulse quicken. With this information, he visited the telegraph office, sending messages to contacts from his drifting years. For the next 2 weeks, Preston worked from dawn past dusk, training horses, reinforcing structures for winter, all while making discreet inquiries in town. Each evening, he joined the family for dinner, reading to the children afterward while Zara mended or kneaded bread for the next day. They never spoke of Elias or the impending sale, but it hung over them like storm clouds. As December arrived with heavy snows, Preston noticed changes in the children. Jacob was sullen, the twins whispering together in corners, Emma watchful and worried. Only little Grace seemed unchanged, climbing into Preston's lap each evening for stories as if he'd always been there. One night, after the children were asleep, Zara joined Preston on the porch despite the bitter cold. They're packing their treasures, she said softly. Little things they can't bear to leave behind. Jacob asked if we could dig up his father's grave to take him with us. Her voice broke. What am I going to do? Preston leaned against the porch rail, gathering courage. Marry me. Zara's head snapped up. What? It would solve the immediate problem. As your husband, I could contest Elias's authority, delay the sale at least. You're proposing marriage as a business arrangement? Her voice was dangerously quiet. Preston struggled to explain. I'm proposing a solution. You need time. I can give you that. And after? When the crisis passes. What then, Preston? Do we shake hands and part ways? Do you drift on to the next job while my children wonder why another father has abandoned them? Anger sparked in her eyes. I won't make my children witnesses to another loss. I wouldn't, Preston began, but Zara cut him off. Yes, you would. It's what you do. You've spent your whole life running from attachments. I see it in you. The way you hold yourself apart, always ready to leave. Her eyes filled with tears that she refused to let fall. I thank you for the offer, but no. I won't build hope on such a foundation. She left him standing alone in the cold, her words burning like frostbite. The following week, Preston made his move. When Elias arrived for his weekly inspection, Preston was waiting in town with the sheriff and a man in a business suit who'd arrived on the morning stage. Mr. Randall, Preston called, stepping onto the boardwalk. I'd like to introduce Mr. Harrison from the Territorial Land Office. He has some questions about the Randall property sale. Elias paled. This is a private business matter. Actually, said Mr. Harrison, it concerns public record. Specifically, mineral rights registered last week by Mr. Calloway here on behalf of Mrs. Randall. It seems a substantial silver deposit was located on the north ridge of the property. That's impossible, Elias sputtered. There's no silver there. The assay office disagrees, Preston replied calmly. Mrs. Randall has granted exploration rights to the Colorado Mining Consortium. Their representative is reviewing the property today. Elias's face contorted. You're bluffing. There's been no survey. No mining company would. I have the papers right here. Mr. Harrison offered his portfolio. All in order. And since Mrs. Randall retains mineral rights regardless of land sale, the value of those rights must be factored into any transaction. Or, Preston added, the sale could be postponed pending proper valuation, which might take months, years even. Understanding dawned on Elias's face. You're trying to block the sale. This is some kind of confidence game. Not at all. Preston kept his voice level, just ensuring Mrs. Randall receives fair treatment. As I understand it, the executor's duty is to act in the estate's best interest. Selling valuable mining rights for a fraction of their worth might be seen as negligent or fraudulent. the sheriff added helpfully. That afternoon, Preston rode back to the ranch, a folded document in his pocket. He found Zara in the kitchen, flour up to her elbows, the children helping prepare bread for the week. "Could I speak with you?" "Privately?" Preston asked. Outside, with snow falling gently around them, Preston handed her the document. "Elias has withdrawn the sale. Temporarily, at least. This is his written acknowledgement that any future transaction requires your explicit approval." Zara stared at the paper, then at Preston. "How?" "A bluff. I registered a mineral claim on the North Ridge. Got some friends to pose as mining company representatives. Made Elias believe he was about to be caught in a fraudulent sale." Preston smiled slightly. "He's on the afternoon stage back to Boston. There's no silver on the North Ridge." "No, but Elias doesn't know that." Preston shrugged. "And it buys you time. Until spring at least." Zara studied him, snowflakes catching in her lashes. "Why would you do this?" Preston looked away, watching the snow drift across the fields. "Because you and those children deserve this place. Because some things are worth fighting for. Even for a drifter who never stays." Her voice was soft, questioning. Preston finally faced the truth he'd been avoiding for weeks. "I've been running my whole life, Zara. Running from pain, from loss. From watching everything I love get stripped away by this harsh country." The words came hard, forced through years of practiced silence. "I lost my family to the frontier. My parents, my sister. I swore I'd never risk that kind of pain again." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "So you became a ghost, moving through other people's lives without leaving a trace. It seemed safer. And now?" Her question hung between them. Preston took a breath that seemed to fill his lungs for the first time in years. "Now I find myself standing still. Wanting to stay? Terrified of what that means." Zara stepped closer. "We're all terrified, Preston. The frontier doesn't promise tomorrow to any of us. But that's why the connections matter more, not less." Inside, they could hear the children laughing. The sound floated out into the winter air like a promise. "I can't offer you certainty," Preston said. "I don't know how to be what they need, what you need. But I want to learn." Zara's gloved hand found his. "Perhaps we learn together." 2 days before Christmas, a proper blizzard descended, trapping them all in the main house. Preston moved the horses into the barn and took up residence in the small attached cabin where Zara's husband had once kept his office. The children adopted him completely, Jacob following him through chores, the twins begging for stories, Emma shyly showing him her drawings, Grace climbing into his lap whenever he sat still long enough. And Zara. Zara watched him with her children, her reserve melting like spring snow until one evening, helping him carry firewood, she stopped him with a hand on his arm. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she said. Preston nearly dropped the logs. "Zara, I didn't mean to pressure. Let me finish." Her eyes held his steadily. "You proposed for practical reasons. To solve a problem. I need to know if that's still all it is. Because my children are already halfway to loving you, and I can't risk their hearts on a temporary arrangement." Preston set down the firewood and took her cold hands between his. "It was never just practical. I told myself that because I was afraid. Afraid of caring too much, of losing too much. But I was already lost the moment I saw you standing on that porch last autumn." Snow fell around them, isolating them in a perfect white cocoon. "I can't promise the frontier won't take everything," Preston continued. "No one can. But I can promise to face whatever comes together. To stop running. To build something that might outlast us both." "You mean that?" Zara searched his face. "Truly," Preston answered by drawing her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that melted years of frozen caution. When they broke apart, breathless, he saw tears on her cheeks. "Does that answer your question?" he murmured. On Christmas Eve, with candles glowing in every window, Preston stood before the fireplace with Zara beside him, the children arrayed in a semicircle, faces shining with excitement. The traveling preacher who'd stopped to wait out the storm smiled benevolently as he pronounced them man and wife. Afterward, when the children were finally asleep in the loft, Zara and Preston stood on the porch, watching the stars emerge as the storm clouds parted. "I never thought I'd find this again," Zara whispered. "A partner. Someone to share the burden." Preston drew her close. "I never thought I'd find it at all. I didn't believe the frontier allowed for happiness." She turned in his arms. "We make our own happiness here. We carve it out of hardship, build it with our hands. Later that night, as snow fell softly outside their window, Preston pulled Zara close beneath the quilts. Are you sure about this? About me? 5 children is a lot to take on. Zara's laugh was warm against his chest. You can handle all 5 of us? She asked, echoing the question she'd posed weeks earlier when he'd formally asked for her hand. This time, Preston's answer held no hesitation, no fear of the attachment that had once terrified him. I can handle anything with you beside me. That's what I've learned. The frontier isn't meant to be faced alone. Spring arrived with melting snow and new beginnings. The north pasture turned emerald with fresh grass where horses grazed, now fully broken and trained. The planting was finished, the barn repaired, and new chickens clucked in the restored coop. On the ridge where Thomas Randall was buried, wildflowers bloomed around the marker, tended carefully by Jacob, who now carried his stepfather's pocket watch with solemn pride. Preston stood on the porch, watching Zara in the garden, the children helping or hindering in equal measure. His drifter's instincts still whispered occasionally, warning of drought or disease or the 1,000 natural disasters that could strip away everything they'd built. But those whispers no longer held power over him. The West hadn't changed. It was still harsh, still unforgiving. But Preston had changed. He'd learned that courage wasn't just about surviving. It was about risking your heart despite knowing the cost. About building something meaningful in a place that could take everything. About finding family where you least expected it. Zara looked up, catching his gaze. Her smile, bright as the spring sunshine, drew him forward into the garden, into the circle of his family, into a future rooted in the soil he'd once feared to touch. The drifter had found his home,